Okay.
Well, greetings, Brother Dr. Ben Harrison. I'm glad you were able to join us in ISITHU, which is just about information that black boys and men need. And I'm glad you're here today. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about who makes uh, Ben Harrison, and now Dr. Ben Harrison?
Wow. So how much time do you have?
Give us the Reader's Digest version.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I grew up in a poor family in New Orleans, Louisiana, raised by my grandparents. And then from high school, I went on to college, primarily to get in the band. I didn't go to college to get an education. I just wanted to be in the band. That was at Southern University. And as a result, I flunked out and then eventually ended up at Grambling, where I realized, oh, this is school. I have to attend class. So the BS is from Grambling College. Now it's called Grambling State University, but it was Grambling College back in the day. And then from there, I taught school for about 12 years in California and ended up at a corporation, Kaiser Permanente, where I was in charge of tuition reimbursement. So I was paying to send other employees to school. I decided maybe I should go. So I went on and attained a master's in education from University of San Francisco because I was in the Bay Area. Uh, the doctorate is from a little school called William Lyon University, which I believe was described as a paper mill. I don't know where they get that from because my task was one that I will never forget. I can remember what that work was like. But that's how I became Dr. Ben Harrison. And I never thought about being a doctor because in the undergraduate school, most of the PhD professors were either alcoholics or,
Mm,
had some other sexual tendencies that weren't quite normal. And
right.
I didn't want to be that. So I thought, well, there's no point leaving with the doctor's degree. But that's it, Bill, in a nutshell, over the years of how I got here.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result, I've run my own company consulting firm for 10 years. And after some medical issues, had to quit that and ended up working at Hewlett Packard for 5 years. So I had enough to retire, and now I'm back and doing my own consulting. But as I feel like it, I'm not really hustling business. I'm doing what I enjoy doing, and Omega Sci-Fi and community policing is one of those things.
Right.
Mm.
Well, on that note, what is community policing and why is it so important?
Well, community policing basically is just a philosophy. It's not a tool or an instrument until the community and the police make it one. If you could pull up slide one, I could show you exactly what that entails. And all of this comes out of President Obama's task force on community oriented policing back in 2015. And at that time, that document was spread all over the country for police organizations to try to do what the document suggested. Of course, some were willing to do it and some were not. But this is the picture to the left of your screen. If you could enlarge that a little bit. This is the three components. These are the three, no, the next screen, not this one. The one back one. Yeah. So if you look at these three components, you would see three circles: an inclusive community partnership. That's one of the elements of community policing. The transparent problem solving approach is the other element, and then organizational transformation. So in order to make a community policing effort a reality, you need all three of these things. And right now, I believe the city of Portland is probably the best idea I could think of that's actually doing this work this way. But community and policing means the police, the community, and by community, that's every element. Generally, it's usually a fight against grassroots and grass tops, because the grassroots are always the same old people solving the same old problems and never getting anywhere. And when you want to deal with community policing, you have to invite to the table those the criminals on the streets that's committing the crimes,
Wow.
because they're the ones who have the information to tell you to find where to find what it is you're looking for and how to solve the problem. So
Right.
the reality is that it's not just a bunch of ministers coming together that they're going to decide just because they know the scriptures, they figure out how to solve policing issues. That's not the reality. And so that's, in a sense, what community policing is really all about, involving the police and the community and strategic problem solving. I guess that's the best way to define that.
And well, how is that working out for us?
In some cities, it's working well. As I just mentioned in Portland, the composition of the community policing effort involves the clergy. And by that, I don't mean just, 10 Black Baptist preachers. I mean, ministry leaders from all denominations, the Baha'i, the Catholic, the Baptist, the Methodist, the Jewish community, that science thing, I can't think of it right now, but, um, all of these come together. Then they have the district attorney, the chief of police, the FBI, and U.S. Marshal from law enforcement. And then from the communities, they have parents who've actually lost kids to gun violence. The leader of this group just lost his son about 3 months ago to gun violence. And so their focus is trying to figure out how to solve the issues of community policing and the violence they're having with guns. Now, to give you a good idea of how it's not working here in Phoenix, where I live, where you have a Black ministerial alliance trying to solve the problems, and they have no clue as to how to get that done, but they believe they can. So as a result, nothing gets done. That's a good example.
Wow. Well, why don't we walk through your presentation and tell me what you think young black men and men, adult men, black men should know.
Well, if you look at the second slide, slide number 2, right here, we have this picture that talks about the Black community and the white community.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I think we have to understand from the very beginning is the core of the issues. And so the core of the issues, what you see, if you would click to the next, in the white community, you can see this is officer friendly and
Right.
citizen friendly, and that's the relationship they have. So what you see in the white community is they are protecting their citizens.
Right.
If you click again, you would see in the Black community, it's about control.
Mm-hmm.
And so we get treated clearly differently. And that's the reason you see right now we have a plethora of white officers shooting and killing Black and brown citizens. But you don't see Black citizens shooting and killing white citizens.
Right.
So the question is, why is that? And so here again, that gives us a sense of what's at the core of this whole issue.
Well, let me ask you this: are all communities concerned about community policing?
Uh, all of those who need to be,
Okay.
and the others are not as concerned. So for instance, here where I live in Phoenix, Scottsdale is not concerned about community policing.
Okay.
But however, South Phoenix is.
Right.
And of course, the media will have you to believe all of the crime is in South Phoenix.
Right.
So therefore, the crimes that are being committed in Scottsdale go unnoticed. And so you will see more police controlling and patrolling South Phoenix, but you see them in Scottsdale whenever they are called. And that's the difference.
Okay.
So no, not all communities are concerned about community policing.
Right. Well, do you want to move forward in your slides, or do you want me to ask some more questions?
You can continue with the questions.
All right. How about this notion that we've been hearing a lot about in defunding the police?
Well,
What exactly is that, and is it important or is it something else?
yeah, it's really something else.
Okay.
And I think what we have to pay attention to is that we will come up with a theme of something we need done in the Black community. And what you will find is white politicians will take that and make it something else.
Okay.
So when the Black Lives Matter group started to talk about defunding the police, they meant and they were hoping for, but unfortunately they used the wrong language. They
Mm-hmm.
were hoping to redistribute the police in budget
Right.
so that we could look at things like social service and mental health issues and things of that nature, rather than just arming police department with tanks and tear gas and helmets and all of that, to continue that philosophy of warriors rather than guardians. And so what the politicians did, especially the Republicans, I'll say that, and I'm not afraid to say it,
Right.
the Republicans took that and made it something altogether different,
Right.
as if you were going to take all of the money from the policing and there would be no budget and no police and more disruption and no law and order. Well, that's not true. So recently we had some discussions in Washington with Senator Booker from New Jersey,
Right.
and Senator Tim Scott, a Black Republican, and then Congressman Karen Bass from California, trying to work on, solving the issue of defunding the police.
Okay.
The reality is the Republicans didn't want to make progress, and as a result, did not make progress. And as a result, we really don't have any progress
Right.
because they never could get to solving the issue that they wanted to solve. And so they put that back on the back burner rather than continuing to work on that. So this is typical of what we're getting from Congress over and over again, is they'll talk about it for a week or two, put it aside, you don't hear it anymore. But for the Republicans, they did not want to talk about this because included in the defunding the police legislation, it also meant addressing things like chokeholds, no knock warrants, and all of, like the no knock warrant is what killed Breonna Taylor,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so we wanted to make sure we solve those kind of issues from the Democrat side. But the Republicans don't want that. They want the police to be able to do whatever the hell they want to do, whenever they want to do it, however they want to do it. And so therefore the legislation has not gone forward.
Well, see, we don't hear it being said like you just explained it. It's not really about defunding the police, it's about a redistribution of funds that can help the community in a larger and more broader way.
Precisely, precisely. And that can be done. And in some communities, it is being done, but at a very small scale.
Well, I have another question.
Mhm.
It seems like all police brutality involves white officers beating up and killing black people, brown people. Now we see some other groups that get brought into this, but little to no black and brown police officers are killing or beating up white people.
Yeah.
Help me figure that out. What's going on here?
Well, I think what we fail to realize, because we just don't know. But what you have to do is look at the DNA of policing.
Okay.
And the DNA of policing is white people mistreating black people. So if you go to slide, I think number three,
This one.
yes, this slide.
Okay.
What we have here, Bill, is in the early 1700s, during after the release, I'm sorry, with slavery,
Mm-hmm.
there were groups that were put together of armed white men whose job was to find runaway slaves
Right.
and bring them back. And they were called the Slave Patrol. Now, that is when policing really began, because from that came the original legitimate organized police departments, like the first in Boston and then New York and then New Orleans and then on and on and on.
Right.
But that was the DNA of this is what the police do. Now, I know that they taught us in our schools you know, the police is friendly, you can go to him for whatever you need and you will be safe. Well, that's not the reality. So when you look at it, I'll just give you a picture of, if you would click on the Carolinas in 1704. This is a picture, a drawing of what it looked like during the era of slave patrols. And these white guys were licensed to just go and find Black people, treat them like animals, and bring them back to their owners. And then they were called paddy trollers or paddy rollers or whatever, which is why when you and I were coming up, they had a thing called a paddy wagon,
Right.
you know, where they would put people in jail. But then let's just go to 2021 at Texas and look at the picture you see here of just recently in Texas, Haitians coming in trying to enter the United States from Haiti. And this was just a few months ago.
Right.
So you can see that the mentality has not changed. And this is why you see a picture like Derek Chauvin's knee on George Floyd's neck. You know, that's the DNA of policing. And that's what the academy trains police officers to be warriors and train them to do what you see. It's us against them. They're on the defense. And as a result, they really become the offense, you know, in the way they are treating a certain population of people. Give you an example. If this also takes us to white privilege. Look at January 6th and what happened at the Capitol. Yes. These were white thugs that tried to overthrow the government. And they lived to talk about it. And they're still talking about it. And they're planning on doing it again.
Right.
If those were Black Lives Matter protesters, they would have body bags all over Washington, D.C., because that's the mentality of policing. So I hope that this paints a rather clear picture that really not a whole lot has changed when it comes to policing. Now, this is not to mean that all police are bad guys or all police are mistreating people of color. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is the DNA of the job that they do is still there. That has not changed.
So what really is happening is that the law enforcement policing needs a blood transfusion.
Precisely. Right. Precisely. So now, you see, go ahead.
Well, we have Black and brown police chiefs across the country now. Are they making a difference?
Well, let me say this, and then I'm going to ask you to go to the next slide.
Okay.
They're making a slight difference because police chiefs, number one, are like musical chairs. You'll see, for instance, I believe the chief in Dallas now, when I met him, he was the chief, I believe, in Houston, you know. And so you see these chiefs change. I've been here in the Valley, Phoenix, for 17 years, and I've seen 4 changes of the police chief in the city of Mesa. I've seen 3 changes in the city of Phoenix. Now, we have a Black chief in the city of Phoenix. Is she making a difference? As much as she can. But if we go to the next slide, I think we'll get a pretty good idea of what this is about. Just imagine this is a police department, all right? And if we do the first click, we'll see where the chiefs are. Here are the chiefs and assistant chiefs. Their job is policy makers. They're not changing what's happening on the streets with patrol officers. They are not there. So when the community has a meeting with the chief, in a way that's good, but it really doesn't get any results. If you would click the next, you will see that what these people are doing, they are responsible for personnel changes. You know, they're hired from the outside. They're like university presidents, you know. You're not good at this university, so we'll hire you at the next university to do the same thing. And that's what they do. They're from the outside and seldom are from within that department. If you click the next slide. Okay, here you will see the police chief's job is like, I guess the best example is similar to a university president. Their job, the president of the university, is to build buildings.
Right.
to shake hands and to attend parties and fundraisers. You know, if you don't see a tall crane with a new building on the university campus, that's a signal the president's not doing his job.
Right.
So the chief of police is the same thing. They spend their time with the mayor and the city manager and the politicians and the police unions, and they are busy fighting fires at that level. But if we go to the next level, if you press again, now you're talking about police commanders, captains, and lieutenants. These are the guys who are the enforcers. They enforce the policy. So when you say law enforcement, this is where the enforcement comes from, because they are managing the patrolmen and sergeants out on the street. And so if you click again, we'll get another idea. Look at this. This is the middle of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the captains, the lieutenants, the commanders are, and they are keepers of the culture. So you remember when I talked about that behavior from slave patrols, and then what we just saw recently in Texas, you can see that over the last several hundred years, not much has changed.
Right.
And they're the keepers of that culture. They're the resistance to change, not yet, just let me stay here. They're the resistance to change.
Mm-hmm.
They're the long-term employees. Now, remember I said chiefs will go from one department to another,
Right.
but in the middle of the organization, these guys and women are here a long time. They don't want to be chiefs. They don't want to move their kids out of the school. They want to stay in the neighborhoods where they are. So they stay in the department. They're the long-term employees. They see chiefs come and go,
Right.
you know. They're the instructors in the academy. They determine who the instructors are to perpetuate that thing. And therefore, the values are going on and on and on. If you click again now. So this is the area of the least of personnel changes. Nothing really changes a lot here. Most of their hires are from the inside. So they go to the same church, they're members of the same organizations or fraternities or whatever, you know, play golf together, whatever they do, you know, that's where it happens. Click one more time. Once again. So this is where we find the DNA of policing. This is where it lives. When you talked about a transplant of blood infusion a minute ago, this is where it would have to happen. Now, that means millions of dollars in several years consecutively trying to change that culture. So when we do implicit bias training, that's just, you know, icing on the cake. The problem is in the cake, not the icing. But that's what we do. Click again. So again, the oldest part of the department, strong collective identities, looked to for approval, union power and influence, and that is the big one. That is the big one. The unions control police departments, not police chiefs. And I think that's a significant thing for us to understand. The union has the power from the federal level to the local level to make or break the chief or anybody else. And so what you will see from time to time is a vote of confidence about a particular police chief. And if that vote is strong, that chief has to go. They've tried it here in Phoenix with Jerry Williams, who is a Black female police chief, but she survived it. And the only reason for that is because she's a native Phoenician. She grew up in the Phoenix Police Department, and those are her friends across the aisle in the union, you see. So they can keep that network working together. When they tried to vote of confidence against her, it failed because she had more friends in the union than she had enemies.
Okay.
Okay. Click once more. Again. So now you see where the sergeants come in. They're the gatekeepers, you know, and the line officers report to the sergeants, not the commanders or not the chief. They report to the sergeants. The sergeants will be the gatekeepers so that they too can become commanders and captains and lieutenants one day. Again. So here's where the problem is, Bill. The police academies are still training officers to be warriors. even today. Click again, and again. But the community is searching for guardians,
Okay.
you see. So
Right.
we're marching in the streets talking about police brutality and stop this and stop that. There's no stop to it because they're manufacturing warriors. And we need guardians. Where are the guardians? In the white communities, in the suburbs, in the rich communities.
You know, this makes a lot of sense when you lay it out like this.
Mm-hmm.
So, a question I might have is if they're creating and perpetuating warriors in these racially minoritized communities, how many, and we see it in front of our eyes where there are some of those bad cops doing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
How often do they get charged with a crime?
Well, that's another issue. If you would go to the next slide,
Well, I
and
sent
we'll
you.
look at,
I'll
and
let.
this is just from 2013 to 2020. I don't have data on 2021,
Okay.
but the red uh, dots show you the number of incidents by police committing crime. Okay, so 98.3% of killings by police from 2013 to 2020, this is what you get.
Right.
And then if you look at the bottom, well, how many of those officers were charged? And after the red comes the light blue, which was supposed to be green. Those are the number that were charged.
Right.
And then the final blue to the right side is the numbers that were convicted. The only way Derek Chauvin was convicted and charged is because police officers took the stand against him.
Right.
Because that little young 18-year-old, 17-year-old black girl had the wherewithal to hold that camera on her phone and get that picture
Mm-hmm.
and got the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what you saw is him with no concern whatsoever
Right.
about that. So you see, he felt like, well, the union is going to back me up, and the majority of us, 98.3 of us, get away with it anyway. So what's the big deal? But this time he didn't. So the question was, again, please repeat.
Well, you answered it right here about how many police officers get away with committing these types of crimes.
The majority.
Yeah. So really, the odds were on Derek Chauvin's side for what he was doing,
Yes,
even being so arrogant and brazen,
yes,
do it in broad daylight.
yes, absolutely,
Wow.
absolutely. And see, this goes back again to what I said earlier about the DNA of the police culture.
Mm-hmm.
See, you can't change a culture by doing implicit bias training for one day
Right.
when half the officers aren't paying attention to you anyway. But
But
they're there because the commander said they had to be there, so they'll do what they have to do and go on about their business. One of the police officers here in Phoenix was asked after their police bias training, did you change in any way whatsoever? He said, no. And the reporter said, why not? He said, because I was already doing the job I need to do. Now, what we don't know is how does he define the job he needs to do? But he was
exactly.
already doing it and he's going to keep on doing it.
Yeah. There's this saying that goes, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast."
Yes,
And so, if you can't change the culture, the strategy that you use is meaningless. So you have to change that culture. And I think what you laid out here perfectly is that there is a culture among some of these officers that is resistant to change, so strategy doesn't work. But if that's the case, what's a good use of diversity training, or does diversity training work?
in essence, in one word, no.
Okay.
I mean, that's it. No, it does not. I began doing diversity training in the early 80s. And before diversity training, it was called conflict resolution.
Yes.
And before that, it was called human relations training,
Right.
because all of the conflicts and human relation issues were about differences
Mm-hmm.
and the way people got along in the workplace. Now, today, 40 years later, my daughter is a manager of diversity, equity, and inclusion in one of the major cities here in the Valley.
Mm-hmm.
But now notice they've added equity and inclusion to it.
Mm-hmm.
What we really need is equity, inclusion, and then liberation,
Mm.
so that we don't even feel like second class citizens anymore. So
Yes.
that's why diversity training doesn't work here again, because it's about changing culture.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a diversity consultant not experienced in managing change, they're not really helping that client get to where the client needs to go. As a matter of fact, they may not even know that's where the client needs to go.
Right.
They think that if they do a good workshop in one day and they check off that they were liked, then everything went well.
Mm-hmm.
You see. But to change the culture means to change the DNA, which means to put up millions of dollars over long periods of time to change culture. It's just that simple.
Yeah. Well, you make it sound like there is a way out of this.
There is a way.
Yeah.
There is a way,
Well,
but it
uh,
takes time and money.
yeah. Are there any slides you want to go to, or I got another question if you're ready for it.
Yes, go ahead.
So, you know, people who might watch this, and you've already qualified that not all police officers are bad.
Right.
So, what's your take on, like, are there any good officers out there? Because when I go home to Chicago, sometimes I just see officers treating people on the black south side or the black west side just like they're all criminals.
Yes.
So if that's all you see, if that's all you encounter, then you can feel that way. But
Yes.
like you said, there are some good officers on in white communities. All right,
Yes.
but where are the good ones, or are there any good ones in the black and brown communities?
Yes. And they're also black and brown officers.
Okay.
You see, and here again, don't take that whole pill that I just gave you, that the good officers in the black and brown communities are black and brown officers.
Right.
Some of them are just as bad and cruel as their white officers.
I've seen them.
You see, so as my grandmother would used to say, just because they're your color, that doesn't mean they're your kind. And that's what we have to understand. There are also good white officers. I'd have to say that as well.
Right.
There are also good white officers. There was a feeling, and I guess some research had been done, that it was sort of like a Pareto analysis.
Mm-hmm.
The good and bad officers were 80-20. 80% were good, only 20% were bad. My experience as a practitioner in this work
Right.
and as a Black citizen watching the news every day, I am almost convinced that it's backwards. 80% are bad and only 20% are good. And you, right now, Bill, while you and I are talking about this subject, 3 months from now, in January, February, March, we're going to see another video about something that happened in November.
Right.
But we don't know it now until the video is put out some sort of way.
Right.
But this is constantly happening over and over again. And even with Derek Chauvin going to jail, they are still taking the chance that the union is going to cover me and I'm going to beat the stew out of this Black person. So look at what just happened when we showed the picture of 1704 and 2021 from the Carolinas to Texas.
Right.
Well, even during that same time, while the Haitians were being pushed back, we were going over and picking up uh, uh, what is not Iranians? What is those people we brought here in tons uh, and found places for them to stay and, you know,
Right.
put them into the community? Afghanistan's.
Okay. I got you.
Okay. you know. Now, what makes the Afghanistan so much better than a Haitian? They're all black,
Yes.
you see, but there's some other social elements to that that makes a difference. But then that tells you what's in the minds of white people, because they're the ones in power and control, you know. I know that the Black Caucus in Washington is working as hard as they can, but I really don't hear any results of what they're doing, you see.
Right.
So I'll stop there before I get in trouble.
Okay. Well, you did say that there were some good black officers, brown officers, and some white.
Yes, yeah.
But we've seen an increase of black and brown officers in law enforcement. What is their role, or has there been an impact in restorative justice, or changing the culture of law enforcement among the bad ones who are black, brown, white, or otherwise?
Well, here again, we have to think back. You and I are old enough to remember a movie, I guess 25, 30 years ago called Serpico.
Mm-hmm.
It was a detective in New York, and this was a white guy.
Right.
They made a big drug bust, a couple of $100,000, and he turned it in.
Okay.
Every officer in the department called him crazy, like, you turn this money. We keep that kind of money. You see? So as a result, they stopped backing Serpico up. That was his name. When he called for help, nobody would come, or they would take the long way around.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this goes back to black officers and white police departments, because there's no such thing as an all black police department,
No.
except in some small black towns in this country, like Grambling, where I went to college, or Mount Bayou, Mississippi, places like that, so that these black officers have to walk a tightrope to survive, so that when they call for backup and help, these white officers will come, not just the black officers, you see. So give you a perfect example. On the day that the O.J. Simpson verdict was read, I was training command officers in the city of Oakland, California.
Mm-hmm.
When they said not guilty, those 25 officers went berserk,
Mm-hmm.
and they wanted to throw a chair, and they wanted to hit a tree or whatever. And I gave them not 10, but a half-hour break. Go outside and kick a tree, kick a car, not mine. That great one is mine, but, leave my car alone. When they came back into the room, I put the chairs in a circle and we just had a venting session. I wasn't trying to teach one single thing. During the breaks from then on, every officer in that group of color would say to me, "Hey, Doc, I just want you to know my personal feeling is not what we demonstrated this morning."
Mm.
You see, so as a group, they were all angry and upset. But the black officers, the brown officers was like, "Hey, I'm glad the brother got off." You see, and
Right.
and so those are the differences that existing and is existing right now inside of every police department where black officers are.
Right.
That's the reality. So in Oakland, for instance, we had the police union, which was the white cops, and then we had the Black Police Association. You see, I've noticed that whenever you see association, it's usually something black.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you look at, the Black Nurses Association,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but the white national something is white.
Right.
In the fire department, they had the Black Firefighters Association, but the White Firefighters Union. You
Mm-hmm.
see the difference?
Right.
You know, so so they're not surviving in those departments as well as we might guess. See, that's the difference. And that's what we have to understand.
Okay. Well, you and I,
Okay.
are we're Omegas.
Yeah.
We wear that experience proudly. We wear it as an honor to be an Omega. What can Omega Psi Phi fraternity do, or is doing, to help address these killings of black and brown people in our communities?
Okay. Um, I can start from the top down.
Okay.
Our Grand Basileus is now the leader of the Divine Nine leaders. and he's meeting with all of those other fraternity and sorority leaders. And they're meeting with people in Washington, D.C., again, some Black Caucus members, to see what they can do about addressing these issues. So that's one of the things we're doing at a high level. What we're doing at the level beneath that is at the district level. At the district level, I have created guidelines for the district and procedures on how to move throughout every chapter to get something done. Some of the easiest and most simple things to do is we can all just have a Zoom call with the members of our family about the police. You know, you don't have to hold an Omega meeting to do that.
Yes.
But by the same token, each chapter is responsible for implementing some things in the communities where they are, because every community is different. So, you know, here in Gilbert, where I live, I could pick up the phone and call the chief. And within minutes, he's going to call me back. That might not happen in everywhere else. Whereas in Los Angeles, they're doing a number of great things with their chiefs in various cities in Southern California. In Alaska, the brother there has established a relationship with the new Black chief of Anchorage, Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first Black chief they've ever had in Anchorage, Alaska.
Wow.
And the brother is working hard with those relationships to build that. So what we're able to do at a district level is directly connected to what relationships we can build and bridges we can build with these various police departments. We just can't take a document and say everybody does this. It doesn't work that way. So what we do is put it out there. If you can, fine, but do what you can from the level where you are. And so what we're working on at the next level beneath that is the chapter level. At the chapter level here in Phi Iota, we are trying to, in Gilbert where I live, we're about 25 brothers who live in the town of Gilbert. We're trying to organize ourselves first as just the Gilbert unit, and then have meetings with our chief right here in Gilbert, not Phoenix. The brothers in Phoenix will replicate the same thing. So those are the kinds of things we're trying to get up off the ground. In the meantime, we have things like the Omega Youth Academies and organizations like that, the organization that you have with the rites of passage for young Black men and the kinds of things we're trying to teach them to understand, you know, surviving the police, things like that. And whatever you do, please don't run. You know, I don't care how fast you are on the track team, you're not going to outrun the police, period.
You know,
All right. Yeah. So those are some of the things that we're doing at the Omega Psi Phi level.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this question to bring it back to community, like you were just mentioning. It seems like a lot of these killings and abuses and things like that are primarily in Black communities, and also as a high percentage in Native communities as well. But the brunt of it for trying to get justice is on the backs of Black people. Why is there is there a divide? Why are different communities, particularly communities of color, seeing these things through different lenses, that they don't see it as the major problem that it is if it doesn't hit them as heavy as it does in the Black community and the Native communities?
Well, for one, I can speak about the Black community.
Okay.
And I believe with, 80 plus years of experience as a Black person.
You're not that old.
Thank you. One of my observations is this. Do you remember the movie Roots when it first came out?
1975.
Do you remember Kunta Kinte running for his life?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember the person that was chasing him? It was another Black person.
That's right.
All right. I was waiting to see who it was because I thought it was going to be that white Dutchman, and I really wanted to see what he looked like, right? Mm-hmm. But there it was, O.J. Simpson tracing LeVar Burton.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, remember, I talked about the DNA of policing a minute ago. Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to the DNA of why we can't get along and why every community has to be different. Because everybody wants to be the one in charge.
Okay.
As simple as that. And so when we're marching the streets and talk about justice, you know, we're talking about the cherry on the top of the icing on the top of the cake. We have no idea what the cake is about. And what we have to understand, Bill, is that, you know, racism in America is like an automobile with a broken engine. And rather than repair the engine, we keep washing the car. And that's it.
Okay. Now let me ask you this question. Since you brought up roots and Kunta Kinte,
Mm-hmm.
you know what the scientists, the psychiatrists, the medical doctors would have classified Kunta Kinte during that time for running away as?
No, I don't,
A
but I
drape,
know you do.
yes, sir. A drapetomaniac.
Say it
So
again.
a drapetomaniac.
Okay.
So a drapetomaniac is someone who was mentally ill, crazy, so crazy that they would run away from enslavement.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you had to do was to catch them,
Mm-hmm.
beat them, and lay them out in the sun
Mm-hmm.
and pour salt on their wounds
Mm-hmm.
so that they would understand and get back to their sanity of the right place to be is in enslavement.
Mm-hmm.
And so they put the problem on Kunta as being
Mm-hmm.
white supremacy and enslavement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you this: why don't black and brown communities just get together and sue police officers or the police um, and the city for committing all these crimes?
Some of that is happening in some cities,
Okay.
you know, but I would be one of the first to say that the brown community is clearly much more organized than the black community.
Wow.
And they're clearly doing some things for their people like we are not doing for our people.
Okay.
I'll give you a good example. We have an organization here in the Valley, CPLC, Porta La Casa, something, I forget the exact name.
Hmm.
This organization provides it provides for their community what the Black Panthers were trying to do for us.
Okay.
The only difference is the Black Panthers use weapons
Yes.
and scared people. These guys are using procedure and getting it done. And they have connections in places you wouldn't believe. Just quietly making progress while we are still trying to talk about who's going to be in charge.
Mm.
And that's all downfall,
Okay.
you see?
Yes.
I mean, I'll give you a good example. Look at the Mormon church.
Hmm.
Wherever there's a Mormon church, every Sunday, they are getting the same lesson
Hmm.
every Sunday. That's unification.
Right.
We got a million black churches teaching a million different things every Sunday because everybody want to be their own boss.
Mm.
So as a unit, we get really very little done. I mean, you can't think of one, well, maybe you could think of one black organization that's really getting a lot done where everybody's on board.
Hmm.
And by that, I mean, take, for instance, the NAACP, a great organization, getting a lot of good things done, have been doing it for years. But how many people are members and supporters of the NAACP? I mean, even myself, I'm not a member.
Okay.
And I can't even tell you why, to
Right.
be honest about it,
Hmm.
you know. But why do we have to have an NAACP and an urban league? What's the difference? Why can't that be one agenda?
Okay.
You see,
All right.
I think that goes to what our problems are from my purview, from what I can see.
All right. Well, I mean, I've run out of questions, so unless you run out of slides, are there any more slides you'd like to?
Yeah, there's one, the last one I can, well, second to the last one on your screen, the little green was slide with the little boy.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I chose this to say why we do this work.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, look at this little baby. He really doesn't have a clue of what it really is going on, but he knows that he matters. And this is what we ought to be thinking about when we do the work.
Yes.
Not who's in charge of what and who's the head of what, but what is our overall mission for doing this work? And then the last slide, the really bright yellow one, here's the great Nelson Mandela.
Mm.
And this is one of his quotes that I love. You know, he, he says, our world is not divided by race, color, gender, or religion. Our world is divided into wise people and fools. And fools divide themselves by race, color, gender, and religion. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, he said it the way it should be, and it's done, you know. So these are the challenges that we're facing, you know. Thank God there are lots of us who are trying to work through it, and I pray that the even generations coming behind us will continue to work through it, you know. But this is where we are. These are our challenges, and I think we know why we do this work. So I'm proud of what Omega Psi Phi is doing. You know, I'm proud of, I made a presentation to the Divine Nine about 2 months ago, their leadership here in the Valley. And they too now starting to focus on what can they do in the area of community policing.
Right. Well, why don't you close us out on what is the major takeaway from this presentation for black boys and black men, black fathers today, and what they should really, grasp?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that they should pause for a minute and try to look at the root cause of the issues we're dealing with. I know that you can speak to 100 people and they'll say what we need is justice. But how many of them would know what the slave patrols are about and connect that to the behavior that we're seeing? And so that we understand that we're not talking about the need for Tylenol. We're talking about the need for surgery.
Yes.
But we have to understand it clearly if we're going to begin to address it. It's not a one-man thing, it's an all of us thing. What Omega is doing is just a drop in the bucket.
Mm.
You know, we have a long way to go. Why? Because it's been going on since 1704.
Yes.
And then Texas showed us the last month that it's still going on
Yes, sir.
with the way they treated the Haitians, trying to find a life. But we sent airplanes to pick up, um, um, what is it? You know,
Anybody else that's not black.
anybody that's not black. Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's a way to sum it up. Yeah.
Well, brother Dr. Ben
Mm.
Harrison, you have really earned your doctor today because you've
Thank you.
dropped some wisdom on us. And so I'm grateful that we've had you, and the chapters across the world will be able to use this. So
Thank
thank you
you.
once again
Thank
for
you.
sharing.
Okay. Thank you. It's been my pleasure to spend this time with you.
All right. I think that was great. How you feel?
I feel okay. I feel okay. I hope it's okay for you. I
Oh,
don't know.
well, the IT team for the district will work their
Fix it.
magic, and
Okay.
put it all
Okay.
together. But you need to be on TV, brother. You might need to get your show. Don't tell nobody what you say. You 80 what now?
82, well, almost 82.
No, don't tell nobody that. You just say, yeah, tell them you 62.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. I
When's your
wish
birthday?
March 17th, St. Patrick's Day.
You know what? We talked about that. Mine is March 14th.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I'm actually Irish. I just look like the rest of you niggas.
Okay.
Oh, man.
appreciate you.
this was good. I enjoyed this.
No, this was great. And
Yeah.
let me make sure.